Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
Thank you, Ken, and the band. Thank you for reminding us that we do get everything we need, don't we? Well, what you're going to get now is the final installment of the 4 agreements. And today, I'm so excited because this is really, I would say, so it's kind of like the crowning agreement in a way, and I'll explain in a minute why that is. Because, just to refresh, Reverend Michael started this, whatever number of weeks, 3 weeks ago, I suppose, and he did the first one, which is be impeccable with your word, and the second one, don't take anything personally, and talked about his own struggles with all of those things, and also took us to a deeper teaching than meets the eye with each of them, and that's their power. I talked about that last week when I talked about don't make assumptions. Same thing. There's a depth to it that's kind of surprising. It's almost like the floor gives way and you start to go into a deeper place when you start to practice these simple things. And today, always do your best. Well, that's intimidating. Can be intimidating for those of us who are perfectionists. I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I know this story really, really well. I know what this is. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. But it's also intimidating sounding to those of us who have been haunted by voices that have told us all along that we've never reached our full potential, that we have never done all we could have done, that somehow there's always something lacking or something lacking in our lives that we feel unfulfilled in or unexpressed in, that there's something missing or lacking still, and we feel maybe at times that the world is set up against us. So always doing your best feels very tricky. It feels like, how do you find your balance there? What Miguel Ruiz says really is that always do your best is really another sort of lighthearted way to follow a path to greater love and happiness in this way. He says that basically this is the agreement that you use to practice the other 3. You use this agreement to always do your best at being impeccable with your word, and to not take things personally, and to not make assumptions, to check things out, to ask for what you want, to be a clear communicator, to mean what you say and follow through on it. All of the things that we have been learning about. Always do your best, he goes on to say, really means this, that your best is going to change whether you're hungry or satiated or overfed. That you're always going to do your best given how your body feels today, whether you're tired or whether you feel exhilarated, whether you feel well rested. Your best will always change depending on conditions and circumstances, but always your best will change according to how well you can show up, how clear is your mind, how conscious are you in this moment. Now, that's not giving you a break from extending yourself, from doing something and acting out of it. It's not a way that we can kind of sit back and just say, well, my best is whatever I felt like in the moment. Because that doesn't really pull some awareness out in us. And really, this is another pathway to greater awareness. He doesn't practice or doesn't actually promise enlightenment, but greater love and happiness. And it has to naturally require something of us, right? To always do our best. He also says, always doing your best is neither doing more or doing less than your best. Starting to break out in beads of sweat again. What exactly does that mean? What kind of a thing? So now you can hear where the perfectionist comes in. I'm hearing always do your best means always doing more. It means running around, doing everything, doing it better, doing it more, doing it better than yesterday, not making a mistake, whatever that is, doing it right, whatever that is, whatever it is that keeps us forever trying to stay good enough to be loved, to keep it all together, to look like we have it all together, to never need anything, to never ask for anything. But you can hear already that there's something missing if always doing your best and doing more than your best is a stressor. A perfectionist, a perfectionistic idea, or a workaholic, fill in the blank, sometimes they're interchangeable, is that somehow that you're always busy and you're always producing. And both of those things our society rewards. So it looks great. It looks like accomplishment. And very often there's lots of successes to show for it. But the internal world is forever feeling a sense of lack or feeling a sense of guilt, even when you reach an impossible standard. Now in my world of perfectionism, when I ever got the standing ovation that I was waiting for all my career, I now have to have one every single time, or I didn't do a good job. Can you hear that? Can you see that in yourself? That somehow it never satisfies because it's never what you do. It's what you do it with. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So this idea of perfectionism, let me tell you something about what the inner mind of a perfectionist looks like. William and I had a home out in Spring Branch, Texas, which is not Spring Branch down the road. Spring Branch, Texas is north of San Antonio. We lived on 3 acres, and we had most of our land was in natural condition, which I loved. But we also had right around our porch, right around our house, a retainer wall, and we needed to put grass growing in it and keep it growing so that the dirt didn't erode behind it and wash it all out. So William contracted with our neighbor, who was a contractor, to bring some dirt down and set it all out for us so that we could seed it. Somewhere in the miscommunication happened, and he brought the cheapest dirt he could find that was gray and had big, big rocks in it, rocky, 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 all through it, and had already laid it all out and put it all out. And here's a little note. Don't hire your neighbor unless you're completely comfortable with telling him what you think about the job he's done for you. Just consider it a little piece of wisdom that I have acquired. So we just chalked it up to a life lesson, decided we'd get the dirt ourselves, put it out ourselves, and in order to do that, we had to remove the rocks. Here's where the perfectionist thing is coming. So you have your wheelbarrow, and we looked on the porch, and we weren't going to pick up all the rocks because that would be impossible. So we were just going to pick up the big ones, right? The big ones that would just keep us from really being able to spread this dirt. So that seemed easy. We looked around, 30 minutes, half an hour, both of us working on, put them all in a wheelbarrow, no big deal. So time goes on, we have all these rocks, and we're doing all these rocks, and we're putting all these rocks, and I looked at the wheelbarrow, it is too big, I'm not even sure we can move it. And I'm thinking, it hasn't budged, we haven't moved it around the porch at all, and there's still rocks everywhere. How could that be? Until I looked at the wheelbarrow a little more closely and saw that at the bottom, there actually were big rocks, a little smaller rocks, with a little smaller rocks on top, and began to realize that when we turn our minds on to remove the big rocks, that it's a note of comparison, and that our mind then goes to getting all the big rocks out, and then what's left is the next biggest rocks, and those look bad, and you got to get all those up. And the next big ones are glaring and in your face, and it's like that still has to be done over and over again. And I'll tell you what, this perfectionist, if we hadn't stopped when we did, I would still be bending down with a tea strainer, going through the dirt, getting the biggest pebble out, till we got to some state of unrealized perfection. That's what we do in our minds. Can you hear how hellacious a life that is? To be dogged all the time by something that is never good enough? That once you turn your mind to comparing yourself, because that's what perfectionists do. In order to feel good about themselves, the only place they can go is to compare themselves to people around them. They weren't really in competition with anybody else, really. They were trying to be the best, whatever that looks like. Of course, they're going to clear the heads of everyone around them, of course. But when they don't hit the mark in their own minds, whatever extrapolated, idealized, impossible, and arbitrary, let me say that, arbitrary goal that we set for ourselves, that's the day I'll be loved, that's the day I'll be good. That whether we ever reach it or not, that the only compensation seems to be, well, at least I'm better than that one, and at least I'm not as bad as this, and at least and so we project this idea of judgment everywhere because we judge ourselves so harshly first. This is a place where workaholics and perfectionists who, like I said, get the rewards of society, but do not live in a sense of reward, do not live in a sense of heaven yet, until we let go of this impossible standard and allow ourselves to be imperfect. So doing more than your best is a good sign, a red flag, that you might be out of balance. So what about doing less than your best? How do you find that? Especially since we kind of moved that standard a little bit and said, well, however you're feeling and whatever you're equipped to do and however ready you are for the day that you're in. You know, in other words, your best changes depending on how you're feeling in any given day and how things are going in your life. How do you decide what's not less than your best? And that's where we get into habits that we may have around defeatism or resentments that we carry. Resentments that somehow everybody else gets a leg up but not me. The world is set up against me. It feels like things are taken away, that somebody can come in, I can work really hard and they have it really easy and they can take it away because I've had that experience. And we start to collect all of the rocks of our lives that have been hard, no question. And the takeaway has been, it was foolish to try harder. That somehow we felt a sense of defeatism. We feel that somehow, no matter what we do, we're not seen, we're not good enough, we're not lovable enough. And to even extend ourselves feels foolish. To extend ourselves and to try again. Here's the biggest showstopper we have in our minds. Who do I think I am? To want that, to do that, to try this. It keeps us contained. It keeps us in a box. But this is all in our own minds. This is not how life really is. So using this idea of the flow back and forth, let me share one story with you about a woman who found where her love could really come from. She was a woman who was always dressed impeccably, always wore makeup, always had her hair just perfect. In fact, she was so obsessed with that image that she'd had 2 marriages, and in each of them, she would wake up before her husband would wake up, got herself made up, and fully dressed before he woke up. So he would never see her without makeup. And so as she went through her life, she had a diagnosis of cancer, went through cancer treatment exactly the same way, impeccable. Nails done, no matter how bad she was suffering with the therapy. Her face was always made up. She always showed up on therapy days fully, beautifully dressed. And even when she needed, she had beautiful wigs to cover the place where her hair had been. And she went through and she recovered. And as she was coming back for a checkup with Dr. Rachel Naomi Riemann, who tells this story, she said that this woman told her that she was now getting ready to get married again. She was engaged to a wonderful man, kind, intelligent, caring, supportive, just a beautiful man. But she felt there was just maybe a lack of passion in their relationship, and she wasn't sure he was actually the one. So one day, she was living in San Francisco, and she went shopping for a beautiful dress. She found this beautiful fuchsia dress. Pink, guys, in case you didn't know what that is, fuchsia. It was fuchsia, gorgeous. And it was a high-priced dress, and she was in this beautiful store, and they said, oh, upstairs is the perfect pair of shoes. We've got some on sale. I think there's some pink ones that'll go with it. Why don't you just leave your things right here and go upstairs and check it out? So she did, and she did. She found these great 4-inch heels, matched her dress perfectly. And that's when it happened. An earthquake came. And in that moment, the building shook everything into darkness and rubble. And wherever she was, thrown to the floor, she crawled out with the other salespersons and made their way out of this building and out onto the street, where her keys and her money and her phone, everything was inside somewhere in a building too dangerous to go back into. And then this woman did what she always did in her life. She didn't know the 4 agreements and didn't know how to ask for help. And so she didn't. Instead, she just turned herself northward and walked to San Rafael in her pink dress and 4-inch heels and started making her way. It took her 8 hours to get home. By then, she had thrown off her shoes that were hurting her feet. She had torn her hose. She had bleeding feet. She had walked through water that firefighters had used to try to put out fires every step of the way, until after midnight she knocks on her own front door. And her fiancé opens it and takes one look at her disheveled, sweaty, unmade face, tattered clothes, bare feet. He pulls her in and he kisses her and he shows her passion he's never shown her before. And later on, she said, why? What was different here? Why has that arisen in between us when we hadn't experienced that before? She was thinking, where has this man been? And he said, because I was always afraid of messing up your lipstick. What we learn when we aren't in some impossible standard of our own, of what is normal, or what is right, or good enough, or most importantly, really, the only reason we want to be good is because we want to be loved. We want to be lovable. And we think looking right and perfect and put together is the way. And really, the way that we get there is to really recognize that we are not what we do. But it is always about who we are and how true we are to the truth of us and how much we are living in love and how much happiness and love are we attracting into our lives, are we giving out from our words and from our actions. The Buddha talks about this sort of idea, neither more nor less, neither right or left, in his teaching on the middle way. It is really the way in which when you start to feel stressed out, when you start to feel like you're not doing it good enough, to feel like there's failure or there's a catastrophic sense, that's what perfectionists often live with. Or if you feel like nothing you do matters, that why should you lift a finger? Why should you even show up? Why should you go do that thing you said you would do because now that you've thought about it better, hey, they can do it without me. What difference does it make if I'm there, if I'm not? A sense of where we don't even show up when we could. When we fall out of that place where we show up with what we are, with what we have, that we answer the invitation, that we show up for the call. It's in that moment that all possibilities open up, that this is the place of the middle way, this is the place of nirvana. And not surprisingly, this might also be the pathway of enlightenment. I don't know. I'm willing to find out. I'm thinking also about Forrest Gump, the movie. Yes, the movie. And there's 2 things that I think made it such a runaway hit. Yes, Tom Hanks, you can think that. But what I really think it was I'm really just going to do an homage to the wonderful editing of the footage, from the old footage where we inserted Forrest Gump into all of these different moments in, I'm going to say it, baby boomers' lives, where we really recognized all of these different iconic moments. And it was so, it was funny, but it was also so moving in some places. But I'll say what it really was the narrative, that a simple person, a simple man, who was not by exterior standards really equipped to be a man of great accomplishment or success or notoriety. And yet he became all those things by simply being a good person who did the next right thing and always stayed true to himself. And he communicated directly, he told the truth, he was good for his word, and he didn't take anything personally. What does that sound like? And no matter what happened, he always did his best. It seems to me that this work in front of us is really simpler than we think. That maybe we don't have to be so accomplished or so educated or so indispensable for other people's lives. That in fact, what we do really matters when we come from our hearts. Because I'll tell you what, you are not set up to fail. The universe is not a trickster universe. It doesn't call you from the heart to see if you're going to make it or not. It knows you're going to make it if you extend, if you choose to try, if you choose to step out. You are guaranteed success. You know why? Because the world absolutely needs you. All of us, but you. And you, 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 and me. Needs all of us doing our best as we can, because we are in search of that greater love and happiness. And I tell you what, that's enough reward for me. And I'll tell you what, if enlightenment comes along the line, it's icing on the cake, right? Do your best and do what you do that only you can do. Do it with love. God bless you all.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.